Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast.
Something that I think I have been deficient at is repurposing and promotion. And now, thankfully, because I've recently been paying attention to people who know a lot more about this than me, I want to spend probably the rest of our time talking about repurposing and promotion, because the old joke, if you cut down a tree in the forest and nobody hears it, did it fall or how that stupid thing goes. And I think there's a lot of folks out there, and I'm guilty of this myself in the past. I remember a few years ago, I produced a fairly long post, a couple of thousand words on how to get started selling on Amazon. And I hit the publish button and I was like, okay, I'm done. And you can guess how well that turned out for me. It didn't really turn out very well at all. So let's first of all talk about repurposing, and then we'll talk about how repurposing plays into promotion, and I'll lead in. So what I've discovered is that it's actually fairly easy to produce large volumes of content, raw content, in a short period of time if you're reasonably well prepared. So let's use the example of, okay, so we'll take this interview as an example, because this is what's going to happen with this interview. I'm sure your team will do it with your half and my team will do it with my half. You and I decided, okay, these are the things that we're going to talk about in this interview. So we've got some bullet points. And beyond that, we didn't really have to script anything, because we both were relative experts in our respective areas, and we could literally talk off the top of our head to produce this piece of long form video footage. And this will get, turned into a podcast, and it'll get turned into a YouTube video. But then what can be done relatively easily is there's all sorts of little snippets and sound bites, 30-second clips, 90-second clips, 2-minute clips, that are great little standalone pieces of content that, if you have a plan to begin with and you've done some keyword research and you know the stuff that you want to pull out, you can then give it to an editor. And maybe you'll have to, like, someone on my team will literally review this alongside of the keyword plan, and they'll make timestamp notes. And they'll say to the editor, I want this snip and 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 this snip. And we'll end up with literally several dozen short clips that will end up being several, maybe even 100 or 200 social media posts, because, of course, there's lots of different social media channels that you can put this stuff on. You having an audio problem on your end there? Did your headphones just die?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you for a second, so I just decided to switch.
No problem. So my point of this is, one piece of, like, for an hour of my time and an hour of your time, I can actually end up with a couple hundred different social media posts. And in aggregate, those posts will help me to promote the main piece of content very, very effectively and do a lot better job at driving traffic. So I'll stop there because I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. So to be honest, I was going to ask you what you do, because this is something that we don't focus too much on, is the repurposing of content. Our strength is on the promotion side. So historically, we kind of think about content in the same way that you did, which originally, when you said find the site that your customer goes to and try to be there, that was the way that we had rethought content promotion. And so we coined something called community content promotion, which, when we first started, was to find various communities where the target audience would hang out and engage those communities and share content in those places, with the goal of driving the right people back to your website. And so historically, that was Facebook groups, it was LinkedIn groups, it was sites like Growth Hackers or Inbound or Reddit, all these different communities where someone has already done the hard work of building an audience in those places. And then you just need to show up in those places to drive those people back to your site. That has become a lot harder over the last 2 to 3 years as Facebook groups, changes to the algorithm happen, and then a lot of people started spamming people, and so that completely changed. So about 2 years ago, we had to rethink our whole content promotion process from scratch. And the way that we think about it now is short-term and long-term promotion. And so short-term is what happens immediately after you hit publish. And what we landed on that does scale, because the challenge with community content promotion is I think it works really well if you are a marketer inside of a company or just trying to promote your own blog. But it becomes very difficult if you're trying to do this for a bunch of different clients in different industries, because then you have to find those groups and communities. So what we ended up on is we do a combination of Facebook ads, Twitter ads, and Google ads. And so Facebook, we do three things there: run cold audiences, or try to find cold audiences to advertise the content to right after we publish. We create lookalike audience based off of key pages on the website, again, just to try to get in front of the right people. And then we do straight retargeting with our content. That drives an initial surge of traffic. And it also allows us to test whether the article will convert. And the long-term goal is for us to drive traffic and conversions through SEO. Twitter is the same thing. It just works well for different types of businesses. And Google Ads is something that's really interesting that we've been testing over the last couple months, or maybe 3 or 4 months. But essentially what we're doing there is, let's say we are going after very specific keywords, and they're not head keywords in the industry. So it's not like that CRM software example, but it's, I don't know, how to find contacts in it's a longer tail keyword that very few people are bidding on. What we'll do is we will set up a Google ad going after the long tail query. Oftentimes Google will say that there is no volume for that keyword, and there's probably no one bidding on that keyword as well, which allows us cheaper click costs and a way to get
clicks.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows us to essentially get a spot on the search engine result page that we want to, but faster than ranking there organically. So it allows us to test conversions from an organic perspective without having to wait six months or so for the actual piece of content to rank. And so, yeah, we use a combination of all three of those methods in the short term to show results immediately right after that we publish. And then the long-term goal is to get the content to rank in the top 3 positions for the keyword that we're going after. And so part of that is through the on-page optimization, and part of that is through building links back to that page.
And tell me a little bit about your process for link building, because this is something that I'm literally going through with one of my long form posts right now. And I'll talk about what I'm doing, but I want to hear what you're doing first.
Sure. So we actually subcontract out the link building part, because we've just always felt that it's better to focus on your core skill and outsource the things that you're not good at to someone else. And so the process that the agency that we work with uses is they guest post on sites that are related to sites that are in the industry, related to the topic that we're writing about. So again, that CRM example, it would be some tech site or software site or a site that talks about different software. We would guest post on there, write an article that's related to how to do something with your CRM, and then get that published on that website. And then in the article, there's multiple links linking out, and one of them would be the blog post that we're trying to build a link to. And so the guest posting thing we found is probably the easiest and most scalable, rather than the outreach. However, I know the outreach works well. You just have to have a very good process and good copywriters for it to be effective, because as someone who owns and runs a blog, we get horrible pitches all day, every day, and they're usually just blocked immediately because they're just really frustrating, and people don't do the initial research to even see what your blog is about. And so for me, I run a marketing blog, and oftentimes I'll get a pitch saying, "Hey, I see your site is about or mentioned healthcare in this blog post. We have this blog post about healthcare. Would you be interested in linking to it?" I'm like, you didn't even take the time to look at the blog. It's not even about healthcare. So I would say if you're going to take the the outreach approach, do it more manually and actually put in the time to do the research, know who you're reaching out to, because I think you'll get a much higher hit rate than if you just set up some program, send out 1,000 mass emails that are templated and trying to parse fields, because you can just tell immediately that that's what's happening.
So beautiful segue to what we're doing for link building. So the first thing that we do, there's two phases. One, we'll call it the promotional phase, and the other, we'll call it the link building phase. So in the promotional phase, I will develop a manual list of influencers who I can tell from looking at their LinkedIn profiles and their Twitter and their blogs that they write about this topic all the time. It's super relevant to their audience. So then, of course, I'm going to create the very best piece of content that I can possibly create, in which case we call them the power pages. And so this is a big, long form piece of content. And I just did this, and the response rate on the emails was fantastic. I wrote to some people some of them whom I knew because they'd been on my show, but others who never heard of me before, like Jason Fried from 37 Signals, for example. I got a reply from him. So subject is, hey, quick question. I love what you're doing with your blog. I know you get a lot of emails like this, so right to the point. You write a lot about this topic. I'm working on a post that's going to be this, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. Is it okay to send you a link when it's ready? He wrote back, as did several others. Yeah, sure, absolutely. We'd love to see it. So what I'm shooting for there is to get them to leave a comment for some social proof. I love it. And then you get some comments from people who are known. And maybe it goes somewhere further than that, but if it does, that's just icing on the cake. So do that with 5 to 10 influencers. Hopefully, some of them, especially once you start to do this repetitively and you build a relationship with them, they're going to say, well, I'll give you a tweet, or I'll put you on my LinkedIn, or what have you. Now, sidebar, you can do another thing called shout outs. There are many folks who are successful on Instagram or wherever else that have an audience, and you can simply say, hey, how much would it cost me to pay you to write a post about this piece of content? Now, that link isn't going to be a good backlink from an SEO perspective. Google doesn't count, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Google counts social signals as quote unquote backlinks. But nonetheless, it's getting your post out there to a wide audience because this particular influencer has exactly your audience. So now we go into the link building phase. There are some really low-hanging fruit ways to get good quality links. For example, you can use tools to find, so you can pick a site, and then you can go into Href and you can say, on whatever site, show me all the broken links. And then you can look at those broken links, and you can then do the site owner a solid, because it's hurting them to have broken links. And you can write to them and say, hey, I discovered that you have a broken link leading to this article about whatever. That article is now gone. I just so happen to have a great replacement article that you could link to and fix that broken link. Would you mind linking to me? That's one way of doing it. The other way is simply, like, if I'm wanting to get a link from, let's say I wanted to get a link from you and I didn't know you. The last thing I'm going to do is just cold email you. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of your content on LinkedIn, I'm going to share it, and I'm going to write something really nice. I'm going to tag you in it. I'm going to leave a beautiful comment on it. I'm going to follow you on Twitter. I'm going to retweet a couple of your things. And then I'm going to email you, and I'm going to be super relevant, because I'm going to say, hey, because then you've seen my name some way, shape, or form in some of your notifications. I've done you a favor. You didn't know I existed. And then I'm going to say, hey, Benji, I've got this super relevant piece of, I read your article on so-and-so, and I think, I'll take a screenshot with a big red arrow. I did this today. I think if you were to insert a link right here to this article, that would make your article more valuable. What do you think the odds are going to be that you're going to pay attention to that email versus the healthcare cold spam email?
100%. That's actually a process that I've used in the past that works super well. So I completely agree with that approach. It's really just about building relationships and showing that you care versus the people that are just trying to optimize for speed and their own results, and they don't even think about the person on the other end. So I know both approaches work. The only time that I have ever added a link to our site has been a broken link where someone did send a really relevant resource that was similar to the one that we had referenced. And when I notice people, so they do share articles, they engage or they ask questions and they're sharing stuff, and then they make an ask, I have some awareness of who that person is at that point. And so I'm much more likely to do something for that person than I would be if someone reached out completely cold. So I think those are both great approaches.
They're just taking advantage of the law of reciprocity. Do nice things for other people. They're going to just naturally feel indebted to you to return the favor. And as long as your ask is not too high, more than likely they're going to return the favor.